Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Run Cape Town podcast. I am your host, Jamie Hutting, and I'm joined by Coach Ntutu Letseka. Today, we are 11 weeks out from race date. So, as we've spoken about in the previous episodes, majority of runners would have started their official marathon training a week ago. So, we're a week into official marathon training for most of the runners for the marathon. And with that, as Ntutu is our coach, answering all of the questions today, he himself is in the middle of summer training. And with that, Ntutu, it might be nice for us to hear from your perspective. What has your experience been through your current training as our runners are at least 1 week into their marathon prep at the moment?
So, luckily for me, I'm not training for a marathon this season. I've already done my marathon for the year. So what I'm doing now is I'm just building fitness and looking forward to bigger goals. My goal is a marathon for next year. But something about running, my least favorite thing about running is that it really tests your patience. Like I love running like with all my heart, but gosh, it can be so testing. And a lot of it is that you find yourself training week in, week out, slogging through, especially now in the summer here. Thankfully, the weather has eased off a little bit, but it's hot, and for you guys in surf, it's cold and wet, and wherever you are, and it's a slug, and you feel like you're not making any progress. You just keep going and keep grinding away, and it just feels like, oh, this never ends. But on the flip side, what I do love about running is that it actually rewards your patience. So if you do stick it out and do tough it out, somewhere along the time, you might just see like a little bit of a change. You go out for, a speed session, that first rep feels a little bit easier. You do a long run and you can finally go out for that last 15 minutes, you don't feel as sore as you did before. Then suddenly the fitness creeps in and you start to feel better. It's interesting. I've just been sort of doing daily mileage, and on one of my runs, like at the end of last month, maybe, I went out for a run, and I just been noticing that things had been getting a bit better, but nothing sort of like hectic. And then this run just felt really fantastic, and I was like, oh, this is really good. So I went and checked the stats afterwards. What I noticed was that my average pace for that run was faster than my fastest split on a similar run at the start of the month. So after
Wow.
4 weeks of just sort of going at it and just sticking to the work, turning up every day, and doing what I had to do, and just doing my strength training, um, like it's coming together. Look, it's a small bump, it's nothing major, but it's just like, oh, look, this has all been worth it. And so I suppose what I really want to tell people is, as you start your training now, this is week one, and as you go through this first 4 week block of training, you're going to start to increase your mileage. Your long run will go up in length, and we'll start introducing some speed sessions for some of you, not all of you, and you might start doing a midweek long run. But as you're increasing volume, your body is going to start like you're putting a stress on your body, and that's part of the training process. We have to stimulate the body to induce adaptation, and part of that stress will just feel like you are almost getting worse. But the key
Mm.
thing is keep at it and keep concentrating on your pillars of like of your recovery, and getting enough sleep and the nutrition and doing the strength training. After a while, your body will adapt, and suddenly you find yourself cruising in things that were difficult. Long runs get easier, intervals get better. So just remember, patience is key. Running tests your patience, but it rewards your patience. And I think that's something that, as I was doing this run, it just reminded me that, like, it's a long process, but that's part of the thrilling part of it as well.
Yes, no, 100%. I've also had that moment. Look, I believe I was not put on this earth to run. However, I do enjoy it, so I will persevere. And in my first real training block, I was heading out for, my easy runs every week, and I was really consistent. And it just didn't feel natural. It didn't feel like it was coming easy to me. And luckily, I was in a beautiful place to run in, and
That
I was
always
just sort
helps.
of absorbed by the environment. And then one day, I was about 20 minutes in to about an hour and a half easy run, and it just hit me. And I'm like, this is easier. This is getting better.
No,
I think I
exactly that.
could actually be more of a runner than I thought. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. But yeah,
Yeah,
thank
no,
you for sharing
definitely.
that with us. As we've spoken about in the previous episodes, consistency is, of course, key, and
Yeah,
following a plan. And I mean, most running plans do have, fluctuation in their volume and in their
yeah,
load. And the recovery weeks are coming. It of
They will.
course, you will be slugging it through those building weeks, but there is light, yeah, within the marathon prep for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely.
But with today's episode, we will be focusing on the long run. That will be the topic of today. And just before we get into that, Cape Town Marathon announced a new starting procedure for this year's race. So I'm sure some people may not have seen that. Maybe emails are busy with other things. So, Ntutu, would you mind just quickly touching on what was announced from Cape Town Marathon?
Yes, I mean, as we already knew, and it's been for a few years, is that Cape Town, you get seeded and you get put in batches, and then those batches go out in waves. So you don't all start at the same time. And part of that is to ease traffic and ease congestion and make it easier for runners to go through. With these busy marathons, especially those first 5Ks, can be quite busy. And as the race gets bigger, they've had to implement this wave sort of start. But what's interesting is that this is something that's common to a lot of races. I speak a lot about London Marathon. It's kind of like the race that I've seen a lot of. They have 3 starts, different color-coded starts, and then at some point they merge into, and then you all run one route. And part of splitting the race into 3 starts, you still all run 42.2 Ks, but it then just means that at each starting point, it's quicker to get into the batches, and then it's quicker for those waves to proceed through and then obviously get onto the road. So for this year, with the race having hit record numbers, as we said, 24,000 people are going to be running the race. Managing that traffic is going to be more challenging. And part of what they're doing this year is they're introducing a 2-start system. So there are going to be 2 different starts that are at the stadium and on Beach Road. And then people are going to be seeded into batches, batches A through to N. And then those batches are then split into different color-coded waves. So I can't remember all the colors. I think there's yellow, red, blue. I'll have to check all the colors. So there are 5 different colors. And then each of those waves then go at different times, and the waves are split between the 2 starting points. And the way it's designed is that when, say, wave A goes through, it's a color-coded wave, but let's just call it wave A goes through. When the last person in that wave is through a certain point along the route, then the next wave can start. And the idea is that you don't get waves clashing into each other. So
Yes.
people feed into the route as they go through, and you end up with a nice orderly procession through the race. And again, it limits traffic at each of those starting points, so people can get into their batches comfortably and then go through the chutes and get into the start and go. And then you don't have this mass congestion for that first 10Ks where it can get very, very limiting. And of course, the race is mat to mat. But even though it's mat to mat, if you are congested at the start, you are still going to be probably walking and shuffling for the first 2 or 3 or 4Ks, and this is going to limit this. You can basically get going and start. It doesn't change things like the cutoff time. So the cutoff time is still 6.5 hours. But the way it works is that you get 6.5 hours. When you cross the start line, your time starts. And then the cutoff is basically based on the last person in the final wave to cross the start. So I think right now the cutoff time is 1:39 in the afternoon. So 6.5 hours from the end of the final batch. So it's a very fair system. And hopefully now with the 2 starts, it's going to limit that congestion in the start, and people will be able to actually run more freely, and then it doesn't affect your times.
Okay, thank you for that. It was a nice explanation, especially for those that might be doing their first marathon. And so, with that, I think it's also good, just a quick reminder to our new marathon runners is to always, of course, just look for these updates as they do get announced, sort of, how can I say, at varying times leading up to events like this. As we mentioned in our previous episode, this hadn't yet been finalized, if I wasn't mistaken. So getting into the crux of today's topic, the long run in Tutu. Now, I think for new runners, they might have heard about things like intervals, track sessions, hill sprints, long runs, easy runs, all of that. It's a lot of terminology thrown about. And so just to focus on the long run specifically, as we have mentioned that in our previous episodes, would you mind just touching on a little bit about the physiology of the long run, and then we can get more into about the execution and the specifics of that?
Okay, so as you mentioned, the long run is important, and we do get drowned in sort of all this verbiage with the different terminologies, the different types of things, but these are all key elements of your training. In the long run, is important for all race distances. So I must just throw that out there. So we don't limit long runs to just marathon runners. If you're training for a 5K or a 10K, you need to be doing long runs because the adaptations that come from the long run help you across all distances. All running is aerobic, all distance running, you're doing aerobic runs, and even a race as short as the mile will have a predominantly aerobic component. In the long run, all those adaptations that I'm going to talk about now are helpful across all race distances. They're more specific to the marathon, and we tend to go longer in the marathon for that reason, but we're still trying to do the same thing. So to start at the beginning, like what we're doing with aerobic running, it means that your running is powered by metabolization through oxygen, the use of oxygen. So what you need to do is get air from the atmosphere into your body and down to your muscles to do the work. So that starts right at the beginning. So it's how much air you're taking in. That oxygen gets into the lungs, and then it must diffuse into the bloodstream, and then that oxygen-rich blood gets transported through the bloodstream into the working muscles, which is where energy production takes place. And in the working muscles, you have muscle glycogen, so that gets broken down into glucose and then gets processed through. I'm not going to throw all the names with all the cycles and things in there. It's not important for this topic. You also burn fat, and fat comes from adipose tissue, and that also gets transported into the muscle fibers. And in the muscles, you have little organelles called mitochondria, and the mitochondria are the energy factors of the cell. That's where energy metabolism takes place, and then that all gets processed. And then once that's done, the waste products are removed, and you produce carbon dioxide, and that has to then be removed, and you exhale that. So it's a whole long process and a long chain of things that happen. And when we go out and we do running at any sort of intensity, but particularly easy running, that's what we're training our body to do. We're teaching our body how to do all of those things and to get better at it. And when you challenge your body a little bit, it just adapts a bit more to make that system more efficient. So as you do more running, you increase your oxygen capacity. So even easy running improves VO2 max. I know people think intervals only do it, but easy running will improve your VO2 max, just not as intensely. You improve, again, how you can transport oxygen through the blood. When you go to the muscles, capillarization takes place, and you increase the amount of capillaries going into the muscle fibers. You increase the muscle fiber size. It's called hypertrophy. You also increase the density of muscle fibers. And within the mitochondria, you increase both the number, the size of the mitochondria, and how much enzymes they're producing to do the work. The enzymes are kind of like your factory workers. They're the ones that are out there breaking the molecules down and producing energy. So that entire network gets improved by just generally going out for a run. And that's why we encourage you to go out and do the running. So with all of that in mind, the long run is just basically a slightly more extreme version of this. It's doing the same thing, but just on a more specific scale. So I'd say easy runs are sort of building general endurance, your ability to go out and run every day. Long runs are more specific. They increase your ability to do this over a long distance. And essentially what they're doing there, like I said, is building specific endurance, and long runs challenge your body. And it's not the pace of the long run. It's so important is that it's the extension of that duration. Going longer and longer and longer challenges your oxygen delivery. It challenges in particular your energy usage. And I'll get into why that is in just a moment. So it's a very, very efficient way of improving your capacity across all levels. So what it's actually doing, then the challenge with long runs, that I'm going to focus on two main things, but of course this is a very extensive topic. I can't talk about everything today in a 30-minute podcast. So the main point that is going to challenge you in is energy depletion, and then in terms of muscle fatigue and recruitment. So from the energy perspective, we have a finite amount of stored carbohydrates in our body. So fat is almost unlimited. You have a lot more fat than we do carbohydrate. It's a very important molecule in the body, but fat is a very slow, it's large molecules that break down slowly, and they do produce energy, but not as quickly as carbs do. But glucose is your main source of energy, but we only store in the liver 100 grams, and in muscles about 500 grams of carbohydrates. So it's not a lot. The liver carbohydrate is there to maintain blood glucose levels, and also your brain. Your brain is the biggest consumer of carbohydrate in the body, so that liver glycogen is basically for those functions. The muscle glycogen is what powers exercise. So when you go long, so for an hour run, you're going to use some glycogen and you'll deplete that maybe 20%, but you'll be fine. You can carry on with the rest of the day. As you go longer and longer and longer, you start using a lot more of that stored muscle glycogen until eventually those levels run low. And that's the main challenge. Long runs challenge how much energy you have available to you. And as you deplete muscle glycogen, your body tends to rely a lot more on fat. And while, again, fat is a useful molecule, it's there in abundance, it's a very slow burning molecule. And so what happens is you slow down. And that's when you get to the end of a long run and you start to feel yourself getting more sluggish and slowing down, it's because fat is becoming the predominant molecule being used for energy production. So that's the one side of the challenge. On the other side is sort of with your muscles and your muscle fibers. So your muscles basically fatigue as we go along. And this is a logical. Those muscles are contracting and relaxing, and you take a ton of steps on a long run, and the muscles basically become fatigued. And as they become fatigued, they start to contract less and less. And that energy depletion issue is also affecting the muscle fibers because the contraction is powered by ATP, that's the energy currency produced in the muscles. So less energy being brought in means that those contractions are not being powered as efficiently as they were before. And in terms of the muscles, we have two types of muscle fibers. So this is like the most basic level of this. It's actually more complex than this, but you have what are called fast twitch muscle fibers. So that's the sprinters, and then slow twitch. The slow twitch are type 1 muscle fibers, and the fast twitch are type 2. And those two are actually split into two types, which are called type 2A and type 2B. And don't get too caught up in this, but type 2A are fibers that can use both. They're called fast oxidative fibers. They can use both anaerobic and aerobic energy production. Slow twitch fibers only produce energy aerobically, and the type 2B, the pure fast twitch, only produce energy anaerobically. So as you're exercising and you're depleting the energy resources and you're getting more and more fatigued, your body actually cycles through the different muscle fibers. So it doesn't use all of them at the same time. It cycles through the different ones, the different pool of muscle fibers. And as the run proceeds, those get fatigued and eventually some of them don't get called upon. And your body always uses the fast twitch the slow twitch muscle fibers predominantly because those are the ones that are resistant to fatigue and they have all the oxidative capacity. They're the ones that are powering energy. As you get long into the run and you start getting more tired, you start calling on those type 2A muscle fibers. Not as efficient as the type 1 muscle fibers. And so that's when you start slowing down. So imagine now you get to the end of your long run, you're glycogen depleted, you've fatigued all of those muscle fibers, your body adapts. And adapts by increasing how much glycogen is stored. And those type 2A muscle fibers then start shifting away because they're what we call plastic and that they're quite adaptable. So then they start now becoming more oxidative. And now you're essentially increasing the pool of oxidative muscle fibers for you to use. You go off your run next week, you're now suddenly able to go longer because your body has reacted to the challenge you put forward to it. So that's really the challenge that you face and how your body adapts to it. And it's a really, really good system. And that's where the challenge comes in, is the length of the long run. As you go along and you have to induce that fatigue, that's when you get the benefits.
I think it's amazing how the human body works. I just think it's so fascinating. But yeah, I think it's good to think or just be reminded of this. I mean, maybe you're listening to this podcast when you're out on a run, but to imagine this actually happening inside your body. It might be even more encouraging for athletes to head out on a run if they understand the mechanisms actually happening physiologically within them. And I mean, if anything, I did say in our first episode that you are a trained molecular biologist with an extreme interest in human physiology or human performance. And I think everyone is just convinced about that now. So Ntutu, you mentioned a lot about the energy systems. And so when athletes are heading out on their runs, I mean, how do they avoid, crashing out when these energy systems are depleting? And maybe we can just touch a little bit more about nutrition, planning for long runs. I know myself, when I head out for a long run of 2+ hours, then gosh, it looks like I'm packing for a week's holiday somewhere. I've got enough food and water to fuel myself for what seems like a week. So maybe we could just chat a little bit more about that for those that are maybe not used to, carrying things on their runs and planning around longer runs.
So I'll start a bit from the end of your question, more about the planning part of thing, is that you really have to make sure that so your routes, we spoke about routes last time. So get your routes in order and have an idea of where you're going and what you're going to be doing. And I'll tell you why that's important now. So that's the first thing. Make sure that you plan your routes in advance, because trying to find a route to cover 3 hours is very tricky and it can cause some anxiety. I know it causes me anxiety not knowing where I'm going. So I do like to plan, and I always have a battery of routes stored on Strava or Garmin Connect, whatever I'm using at the time. And then your kit, really, really
Yeah.
important. If you're going to be out on your feet for 2.5 hours, you need good shoes. So please, at this point, go out, go to a running store. A lot of stores will put you on a treadmill, check your fit and how you run, and people who are experts at this can advise you on the best shoe to go with. And the best shoe is not the most expensive shoe; it's the shoe that works the best for you and your feet. And it depends. You'll hear things like, "Are you neutral? Do you pronate?" and that sort of thing. But that's a lot of stuff that you don't really want to think about too much. So go out and get fitted and make sure that your shoes are comfortable. If you're going to be carrying stuff like Jamie, you're saying you packing for like the whole week, find a hydration vest that fits. When I bought mine, it was, like I said, it was chafing me, and that's not comfortable when you're
Yes.
25 k's in and you've got neck chafe and lower back chafe. So make sure you get a hydration vest that can carry the stuff that you need and is comfortable and doesn't chafe you in the wrong places. That's sort of very important. When I was talking about the planning of the routes, a lot of it is like this idea of taking water, that you, back in the day, there was this idea that you should run your long runs fasted. The idea being that you're going to challenge your body, and it will, you're going to challenge the depletion, the fatigue. But what we found with this is it actually makes your runs poorer. You struggle
Yeah.
on the run, and then it also impacts recovery afterwards. So actually fueling your runs is far more beneficial in ensuring that you're able to run strong for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, or 3 hours. So when you plan your route, try and plan a route that allows you, if you're carrying a hydration vest with a bladder, or you've got like those little plastic flasks that you can fill them along the way. I used to run and plan my route around petrol stations when I was in South Africa, and just
Yeah.
and actually these watches now support things like Apple Pay. You've got an Apple Watch or Garmin Pay where you can just load your card on, so you can just pop in and just tap with your watch. So I used to go out and buy water en route. It was easier than, because I didn't carry stuff around. But if you do, but also it might just help to just buy a bottle of water, pour it into your flask, and carry on. So that's actually quite useful. And then of course your gels and things. It's not just gels. It can be gels, it can be chews, it can be energy bars, whatever it is that you want to take. People take dates, jelly babies. Doesn't matter what it is. Carbohydrate is carbohydrate when you're out running. Just make sure that it's something that you can tolerate.
Yeah.
I'm fine with gels. Other people I know don't like gels. So just figure out what it is that you need, because it's really important. Fueling your runs is critical to ensure that you actually perform well. And it's also a good time to practice for race day, because you're going to go out in a race and have to take all this stuff in and need to have your frequency and your intervals when you take them in done. So that's part of this. So you need to just make sure that you're able to have that in place and have the plan. And nutrition is really the cornerstone of ensuring that these long runs are beneficial to you and that you're able to recover from them afterwards, because recovery afterwards is super, super important. And then plan your meals afterwards. Please, guys, you have to eat after you finish your long runs. And we try to work in sort of like with protein and carbohydrate, because protein, with that, all the muscle we've been talking about, you damage muscles when you run. So from a carbohydrate and protein mix, we aim for a 3-to-1 mix. So 3 parts carbohydrate, 1 part protein. And I'm an advocate for this, but chocolate milk, M&M, Steri Stumpy, all those things. Actually, Steri Stumpy has the perfect, and it's a, for our South African listeners, that's obviously a common product. Steri Stumpy has that perfect 3-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein. And that's a very good thing to have in
Yes.
the house. Of course, you can also buy recovery mixes from different companies like 32GI and all those different companies, or whatever it is, USN, Hammer. There's so many different brands. Whatever you're comfortable with, but just have something ready for you to have, and
Mm.
then have like a normal breakfast afterwards.
Yes, no, 100%. I think, yeah, the planning around it is so important. Not, of course, I mean, if you're out on a 2-hour run and you realize you don't have anything to fuel on, panic sets in. But also,
Mm.
as you mentioned, the practicing for race date. I
Yeah.
mean, something as simple as chafing, for example. I believed that I did not ever chafe when I would head out
Yeah.
on my runs, but I'd never run longer than 2 hours before.
Yeah.
And the race I was preparing for, I knew I was going to run longer than 2 hours. And so I only discovered that I chafe when my training progressed. And
Yeah.
so something as simple, or actually I was quite fascinated by this, that after during these long runs I chafed on my thighs, and I had never had that before. And then
Yeah.
I picked up a little bit of knee pain, and I saw the physio, and she noticed how, as my muscles would fatigue, only after 2 hours did due to muscle weakness, the legs
Yeah.
would start to come closer together. And that was actually
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
sign that helped me pick up, okay, we need to start a rehab process. But yeah, with
Things you learn. Yeah.
nutrition, I think 100%. I think it's important, now is the time to practice your fueling strategies, see what works for you, which gels, if you are a gel person, maybe there's a brand that works best, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for that, Ntutu. Now, with the actual execution of the long run, how does that differ in terms of pacing? We spoke a little bit about easy runs, all of that. How does that change heading out for these longer durations?
Okay. So one thing I must say here is we shouldn't think of long runs as just extended easy runs. Long runs are not easy runs. They're probably for most people going to be the hardest session you've got in your training program, because it's usually doing something you've never done before. So, but we do run them at the same sort of pace that we do for easy runs, because that's the zone where you're getting all these adaptations that we talked about before. So you tend to run them at your easy run pace, or even a little bit slower, because again, you're going for long durations. So that, remember, the key with the long run is that it's not so much the pace that's going to be the stimulus for a lot of people, it's the duration. Going out and running long is what generates all those challenges that we have to our body to cause adaptation. So I always say start slow. You've got time. And I love this about the long run. You've got time. So start slow, start easy. Those first 20 to 30 minutes, don't think you've got to be like on pace from like the first step. Ease into your
Yeah.
run, be calm about it, be chill, and give yourself 20 to 30 minutes to pick up and get where you need to be, and then settle and avoid chasing people, accelerating, going out too fast. Try and maintain an even effort for as long as you can, because as you run longer and longer, it will get harder and harder and harder. So try and maintain a
Mm.
nice, easy tempo and just keep it chill. And like I said, in here, it's also where you start to do your nutrition. So you have your sort of intervals, and I work on 30 minutes. Every 30 minutes, I take something in. But it
Mhm.
really, and the science shows, as long as you're taking in enough carbohydrate for that hour per hour, and we work on about 40 grams per hour for most people, but can be 40 to 60
Mhm.
grams of carbs per hour. And typical gel has about 22 grams of carbs, for example. So you can take 2 gels per hour to make sure that you're getting enough carbs in for what you're trying to do. And of course, they're stressful. So I always say break it up, especially if I use those 30-minute intervals as the break point. I'm running to the next feeding point. So
Yeah.
it's a very useful way to just break things up. And then those chunks just make, instead of thinking of a 2.5 hour run, I work in 30-minute blocks. So 2.5 hour run for me is basically, what's that? 2, 4, 5, 30-minute chunks. And I deal
Yeah.
with each chunk, stop, take my gel, carry on, and so on, so on, and so on. And of course, use resources available to you. Run with friends where you can. And we spoke last week about doing long runs in races. As long as you're disciplined about pacing, that's a good
Yeah.
avenue of just making things a little bit easier.
No, 100%. I was actually, now I'm a big snacker, and using those gels is a nice way to break up the long runs. Maybe you are sometimes having to do a long run on a treadmill, which
Mm,
I know for some people they enjoy it. You might watch a movie or two, but for others that could be the worst thing
yeah,
to do when it comes to run. So it's nice to use that as a reminder, break up your long run. And
yeah,
something to think about is, I mean, when you are now doing your race, you have your nutrition down, what you're going to eat, when you need to eat it, but also then remembering to do it
yeah.
at the right time. So often, with the excitement of race day, you might have the time flying by and not even looking at your watch. So it's good to also just get into that habit,
Yes. So it
with
becomes routine
enough
for you to
time.
do it.
Yes, exactly. So in the previous episodes, we spoke about, where you should be coming into your official marathon training, sort of being able to run, an hour and a half, 2 runs comfortably already.
Yeah.
But with the long run, I mean, do we need to be running a marathon during our training? Like, how long are these long runs that we're speaking about, and how
Yeah.
far is enough?
Yes, it's always the golden question: how far is a long run, firstly, and how far do you need to go? So, I mean, look, a long run for some people, they'll say it's your longest run of the week. That's an easy one. So, if you do your longest run this week is 12Ks, that's your longest run. So that's your long run. That's fine. I've seen people use things like 50% of your general run. So if you are someone who runs 12Ks on most days, for example, or you run for an hour, then an hour and a half is your long run. That's all good guidance. But from what we are looking for with the physiology and the adaptations, we are looking at sort of 90 minutes. The challenges that we have with metabolism and muscle damage and fatigue really start to become apparent after 90 minutes. And like when you start doing a long run, 20 minutes, 30 minutes is fine. An hour can feel long, but it's not so bad. But once you get past 90 minutes and start progressing towards 2 hours, you do start to feel those challenges. So that's kind of where we are. So that's the start point of the long run is 90 minutes. And I know people argue about this ad nauseum. It doesn't matter. We're just looking at it from the adaptation position. Then how far you need to go. There's nothing magical about doing a 20-mile or a 32K run. And I always like to use the example of, say, if you're someone who runs a 4.5 hour marathon, for a 20-mile, 32K run, it will take them like almost 4 hours at easy run pace. But if you have someone who's training for a sub 3 hour marathon, they might do it in 2 hours 30 to 2 hours 40. Those are not the same runs for those two people. If I go out and run for 4.5 hours, it's a lot more work. And it's a reality that as your marathon time gets longer, you do have to spend more time on your feet. But don't do it by distance. Just think about that, because if you start worrying about distance, then you're not thinking about how long you're going to spend, and we're always trying to balance recovery. So what we do try and do is try and get you to run sort of the equivalent time that you're going to do for your marathon up to a point. Because once you get to 3 hours, 3.5 hours, and so on, we start to see like diminishing returns where the value of the endurance benefits from doing that run are countered by the effects of on recovery. And when you get to that point, you have to balance that cost. And we are always trying to balance between going out and actually doing the work, and then can you recover from it and carry on and do the training the following week? And if it's going to impact training, then it's not worth it. And we tend to cap our long runs at about 3 hours and 45. Because we just find once you start heading to 4 hours, 4 hours 15, it just starts to get too difficult for people, and then it just impacts the rest of the training, and they actually aren't able to do any more work. So they'll generally peak at about 3 hours to 3 hours 45 for us, for most people, starting from 2 hours, and that's about as far as you really need to go. And remember, it's not one run. It's the entire plan that comes together. So it's all of the things you do, the midweek long run, the strength training, the easy runs, any interval training, all of that together contributes to your success. The long run is just part of the equation. So don't put so much emphasis on that one run that might derail the rest of the training.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think also as the long runs get longer, I mean, people are, they have a life outside of running, and doing a run longer than 3 hours 45 on a Sunday, it's going to make work quite tough the next day. Never mind, your
Exactly.
training.
Yeah.
But when heading out on these long runs, just maybe if we can touch a little bit about pacing. We've spoken about pacing, if we were to enter a race to make our long run more enjoyable. But a lot of people speak about marathon pace, race pace, 10K pace, all of that. Maybe we could
Yeah.
just chat a little bit about long run pacing.
Yes, look, I'm not the biggest fan of marathon pace long runs, and not that they're not a good session, particularly when we're dealing with amateur runners. And again, I want to come back to the point that for most people, the long run is going to be the toughest run of the week. And what I want to see is rather have people being able to handle the long run, get people comfortable running long and spending time on their feet before you start adding in elements to the long run. So if you're very advanced and you've run for 10 years, you've got marathons under your belt, then you can start doing some stuff in your runs and maybe challenging yourself a bit. But until you are comfortable doing a 3 hour long run, again, why would you want to make it more difficult for yourself and then again impact your training going forward? And again, I'll come back to the example of that 4.5 hour marathon runner. People like to do like a 2 hour long run at marathon pace. For that person, that's 2 hours and 15.
Yeah.
In terms of running length, you got to do a warm up and a cool down for your run. And what happens is, because it's so long, you end up skipping those elements which are important. So if you do your long run and cool down plus your 21Ks at marathon pace, that's a 2 hour, 40-minute long run. And we're saying
Yeah.
this person is still adapting to the long run. So why are we going to add that layer of difficulty where we do 80% of their run at marathon pace? So get
Yeah.
used to running long first, build that capacity, and then later on we can look at doing other things. But we do add marathon pace in different ways. We have like those sessions that we call tempo intervals in our programs that do give you a little bit of that capacity, and we do factor in interval training and faster running. So we're not saying don't do anything closer to race pace, but just that the long run is the long run, and treat it as such, and treat it with respect, and learn to execute it first and get used to the rigors of it first before trying to make it more complex and adding elements to it. So do the basics first before moving on and performing advanced workouts. And I know there's going to be arguments about this, but really it's about protecting the athlete and ensuring that the athlete is
Yeah.
able to train through, build fitness, and actually get to race day fit and healthy.
100%. I think you also need to enjoy your long runs. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'd prefer to enjoy my training leading up to a race I've signed up for. It is, I think,
Yeah.
about enjoyment. And so, yeah, I think it's important to enjoy your run while you're out there. You know, take it nice and easy. Don't force yourself. If you're going up a hill, you're allowed to walk, kind of thing, especially
Yeah,
for those, heart rate spikes and all of that. And
exactly.
yeah, enjoy your run, especially if you're going to be out for 3 hours on a Saturday or Sunday morning. Then might as well make it enjoyable.
Yeah.
But yeah, with that, and Tutu, I know that this is a topic that you can go on for days about, but I think we've covered the importance for today. And I see that, yeah, we've actually gone on for 36 minutes already. Look at that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and we
But
could keep going, but it's probably best to cut it short now.
exactly, no, but we will of course, touch on some of these topics in the episodes to come. But for today, I think that is super valuable information. So thank you for sharing that with us. And then we'll chat more next week in episode number 5. And so with that, in Tutu, I'm going to greet. Thank you so much for everything, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much, Amy, for having me. And I do enjoy these conversations and very much looking forward to episode 5.